All right, Bobcats, so in this lecture, we're going to go over the fundamentals of the endocrine system. But before I get started, make sure to like and subscribe. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the overall function of how the endocrine system works. So within the endocrine system, we have endocrine glands. And these endocrine glands, they secrete hormones. So once these hormones, they get into the blood, they'll then travel to their target site. Upon reaching their target site or target tissue, they will bind to their receptor and then elicit a response by that cell. And so the macro effect of some of the things that the endocrine system controls. So first off, you have nutrition and metabolism, as well as fluid balance and electrolytes. It also helps to regulate reproduction. And another thing that it also helps to regulate is growth and development. Okay, so this is from the macro perspective. So now let's go back to what I mentioned earlier about how hormones binding to their receptors. So a hormone has a particular target cell where the receptor is found. However, the location of the receptor, it's going to vary depending on the hormone. So there are two main types of hormones. So you have cholesterol-derived hormones and then amino acid-derived hormones. So the hormones that are derived from amino acids, the receptor, the location, is found within the cell membrane. So this is for amino acid derived, right, which includes peptides, proteins, and then even amino acids. Okay, so then for cholesterol derived, or these steroid hormones, their receptor is found within the cytoplasm. So this is what I have depicted here. So for amino acids, here within the cell membrane, and then for the cholesterol derived, it's here within the cytoplasm. So the next thing is, well, how do we classify them? What are some of these different types of hormones? So cholesterol-derived molecules include, or derived hormones include testosterone. You also have estrogen, as well as progesterone. Within the adrenal glands, you have cortisol, as well as aldosterone. So keep in mind here that we are using cholesterol in order to synthesize all of these particular hormones. Okay, so now let's go to the amino acid based ones. So for the adrenal gland, you have what's known as epinephrine or adrenaline. For the thyroid gland, you have T3 as well as T4. So for some of the peptides or proteins for the hypothalamus, so the hypothalamus contains releasing hormones. And all of these are peptide or protein based. For the pituitary gland, this includes tropic as well as non-tropic hormones. So we're going to discuss what these terms mean a little bit later on, tropic and non-tropic. For the pancreas, a couple of the different hormones include glucagon as well as insulin. And then for the thyroid gland, we have something that's known as thyroid stimulating hormone. Okay, so now let's dig in a little bit deep. So once a hormone binds to its receptor, what is the effect on the microscopic level? So when the hormone binds to its receptor, what we can stimulate is protein synthesis. And we can synthesize different proteins. So we can synthesize enzymes. We can also synthesize ion channels. And another thing, we can also synthesize structural proteins. And including just synthesize each of these, we can also either activate or inhibit certain enzymes, and we can also open and close some of these ion channels. And how do we go about doing this? So once the hormone binds to its receptor, what occurs is intracellular signaling. So this is what enables all of these things here to occur at the micro level. And one thing that we're going to discuss in the next video, we're going to talk about the secondary messenger system. So we'll talk about something known as cyclic AMP. Now let's talk about secondary messenger systems. So the specific secondary messenger system that we're going to discuss relates to cyclic AMP and what's known as G protein coupled receptors. So for amino acid based hormones, we have our hormone is here, so we're going to write number 1 as our hormone. And what this hormone binds to is a specific receptor. So number 2, this receptor is known as a G protein coupled receptor. So this G protein coupled receptor, what's bound to it right here, number 3, this is what's known as a G protein. So this G protein is composed of 3 subunits. So you have an alpha subunit, a beta subunit, and then a gamma subunit. And for this G protein, in order for it to become active, what needs to happen is once the hormone binds here to the receptor, to the G protein coupled receptor, we get an exchange of GDP for GTP. So what this does, it activates this G protein here. And in its active form, we term this, it's what's known, so I'm going to write this in purple. This is what's known as, so number 4, this is a G stimulatory protein. So this G stimulatory protein, it's composed of the alpha subunit of the G protein as well as GTP. So you can think of it as a switch. So whenever GDP is bound here to this G protein, it's inactive. In the active form, we have GTP plus our alpha subunit. So when we have our G stimulatory protein, the next stop in this cascade is number 5. So number 5, this is what's known as adenylate cyclase. And what adenylate cyclase does, it converts, so I'm going to do this here in blue, it converts ATP into cyclic AMP. So adenosine triphosphate gets converted into cyclic adenosine monophosphate. So we're losing 2 of our phosphate groups. And once we have increasing levels of cyclic AMP, so cyclic AMP, this is what's known as our secondary messenger. And this secondary messenger, cyclic AMP, what it does is it activates number 6. So number 6 is what's known as pKa, or protein kinase A. And so what kinase enzymes do is they add phosphate groups. So they add phosphate groups to things in order to either activate or to inactivate them. So once we have our protein kinase A, we can either activate or inhibit an enzyme. Or what we can do is, with protein kinase A, we can either open or close this ion channel over here by adding a phosphate group to this channel over here. Okay, so that's going to do it for the amino acid-based hormones using this secondary messenger system. So now let's talk about steroids. So with steroids, we have, so I'm going to write our hormone. So we have this steroid hormone, and its receptor, once again, it's found here within the cytoplasm or within the cytosol. So the hormone will bind here to its receptor, and then it forms what's known as our hormone receptor complex. So the formation of this hormone receptor complex, it gets translocated here to number 3, so this is the nucleus. So it gets translocated to the nucleus, and then this is what's representing DNA here. So when we get within the nucleus, we activate transcription factors. So activation of our transcription factors allows transcription to occur here, and then the transcript comes out. So we have transcription, and then when we make our protein, we have translation. And the different types of proteins that we can make either enzymes, or we can also make structural proteins. All right, so that's going to do it for this lecture.